So I'm doing Evolve or Die because Jonathan totally fucked that one up. So we're gonna redo that one. Obviously this is gonna be from my perspective, so there might be some shit you disagree with, but I don't know how else to talk about it just from my own perspective. So I don't really look at Evolve or Die from like a physical standpoint, because especially in our sport, a weight class sport, the size stuff doesn't really matter. Like, humans aren't getting bigger and stronger and faster, and they haven't evolved in the last century. So there's a bunch of examples that you can look up of how the human race hasn't really physically evolved. But in 1936, Jesse Owens was the world champion, the 100-meter dash. And in 2008, Usain Bolt broke that record. So in that time, when Usain Bolt crossed the finish line, he would have been 14 feet ahead of Jesse Owens. But sports scientists and all these other fancy, smart fucking people broke down his body mechanics and then took into account the difference in the surfaces. Back then they didn't start in like the sprinting blocks or whatever, they just dug a hole with like a little shovel and then just ran. So they think that Jesse Owens would have been one stride behind Usain Bolt back in 1936. So the human body's not really changing that much anyway. So when I think of evolution, I think of mental, right? So when we're trying to evolve, essentially we're just trying to get better, right? We're trying to just be better fighters, at least in our situation. So I was gonna break this down into ways that, like things we're doing that we're not evolving, right? So one of those ways, specifically with fighters, is not purging the chaos, right? So I talk about all the time, I've probably said it 1,000 times, I'm sure you guys have heard me say it, that you're never gonna be a successful MMA fighter at the highest level until your personal life's together. It's not. You gotta figure that shit out, the social media drama, the baby mama drama, the relationship shit, all that chaos is just gonna pull away from your ability to evolve, as a mixed martial artist, right? So the next two things are satisfaction and complacency. So there's been a bunch of times, and I'm not gonna point anybody out or anything like that, but I see people leave the cage on like Friday sparring, super happy with what they did in there. You can ask Mark, how many times have I left there from sparring and been happy about it? It's never happened. It doesn't matter if I won the rounds, I did really, really well. There's probably something there that I did that I didn't want to do, or something I didn't do that I did want to do. So that's a way that we can stop our evolution mentally in this sport, is by being satisfied and complacent. It's one thing to show up every day and be here, but it's much different than being present, right? So the next thing is focus. It's easy to show up and go through the motions and just be happy that you made it on time or not on time. It's different. You got to be focused. You got to have something to work on. And coach does a good job of talking to us before the practice on what we're going to work on, but you got to really dial in on that shit. That's the only way that you're going to get any better at it, is really focusing and thinking about the task that you're about to do. It's easy for him to say, oh, I'll do a 4 count, and then we just lollygag our way through it and hopefully we get a good warm up and not. But like, if you're really focusing on 4 strikes that you can get through and you're weaving in your warm up and you're shaking and you're just super focused on what you're doing. So, which leads us into the next one, is not knowing your physical capability. And there's only one way you can do that, which goes into the ways to evolve, right? So I watched this thing one time. It was about, like, when you watch a movie and you see someone get like an electrical shock and it shoots them across the room. That shit actually happens, but there's no actual explosion that happens from being shocked by electricity. It's the electrical impulses firing every single fiber of muscle in your body and so your body's shooting itself. So essentially you're jumping across the room. So like, that gives you an insight on like what your body's actually capable of, but your brain creates like a governor and doesn't allow you to do that for fear of injury and tearing ligaments and breaking bones and shit like that. But we can tap into that a little bit and we can push that rev limiter back as far as we can, but there's only one way of doing that. And that's just fucking doing it, Like, you're never gonna know how far you can push yourself in an armbar in a fight if every time your arm gets a little extended, you tap in practice. I'm not saying let people in practice break your arm, but you gotta push that shit as far as you can every single time, or you're never gonna know every time you get in a fight, your arm's gonna get straight and you're gonna think that that's as far as it can go. And that's not the case. You've seen plenty of people in fights get their arms stretched way past the point that you would probably let it go, and then get out of it and they end up winning the fight or whatever. So it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu as far as how long it takes before you're gonna go out on a choke. Like, you gotta push those limits a little bit, or you're never gonna be able to evolve and push that limit higher and higher and higher, right? So you gotta trust yourself, and that goes into that. You gotta trust that you have the answer to get out of it, but if every time you get a little bit of adversity, you tap and you restart, then you're not trusting your ability to get out of that submission or whatever. And you gotta trust your coaches, and you gotta purge the input. So those are two things that are kind of iffy. Like, you gotta trust the coaches and the people that are around you, but you also have to purge the input. Like, you can't have all sorts of different input coming in from all these different places, whether it's managers or marketing people or whatever. Like, you gotta have your home base of people that you trust, whether it's your nutritionist, you got one person and that's it. You got one manager and that's it. You got one head coach and that's it. You start having a bunch of coaches telling you a bunch of different things, it's never gonna work, because no two head coaches think exactly the same. So in my situation, Mark runs everything, and then the other coaches, they all communicate and everyone's on the same page. If that wasn't the case, then I have too much input and you're never going the right direction. And the last thing is honesty. If you're not honest with yourself, you're never gonna be able to get any better, and that's really what evolving is. It's getting better, right? So if you think that you're better than you are, and you're not honest with yourself, and you trick yourself into thinking that you're all right, there's just no way you're gonna grow. And that's really what we're trying to do here, right? So if you look at early on in my career, I took a lot of really early losses, and I was convincing myself that, I just got caught, or had this not happened, I'd have been okay, and I was making a bunch of excuses. And it just wasn't being honest that I just wasn't fucking good enough yet. And the faster you come to terms with you just might not be that fucking good, the faster you're gonna grow. And I'm not saying that I know it all or I have all the answers, but if you don't do most of those things, you're not gonna evolve and you're gonna die. So that's it.